Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday morning, and this is Pastor Rex, and I want to bring you another dose of daily Bible today. And today I want us to think again about this area of sin, of understanding sin. Yesterday we talked about the fact of, does God judge sin? And we decided, yeah, He does. But that's a part of the nature of God's justice. But when we look at the other side of God's nature, which is God's love, we would say, well, wouldn't God protect us from sin in some way? Well, when we look at life and when we look at the scriptures, we discover just that God has put in place some protections to keep us from the power and the damage of sin in our life. Now, today I want us to just look at 7 of these protections that God has put in place. It's kind of a hedge or a wall that He has set in place to protect us. Now, the first of those protections is, number 1, excellent parenting. Now, excellent parenting, just means that you have parents who love you, who care about you, and they are godly parents who want to pass on godly values to you. Now, maybe you didn't have godly parents, but you want to be a godly parent. Well, that means you can be a part of protecting your child from that as well. So, excellent parenting is the first protection that God has set in place. Now, the second thing that we see is excluded behaviors. That's number 2. Excluded behaviors means that just as parents have clear rules of this is acceptable, this isn't, this is right, this is wrong, and they tell their children, do the right and avoid the wrong. Well, God gives us clear rules and expectations on the things that we are to avoid or stay away from or flee from. And so excluded behaviors means that God, as a good parent, makes clear rules in the household. The third thing that is in place to protect us from sin is the effects of sin. If it wasn't for the effects of sin, man would just go deeper and deeper into the whole practice of sin. But God has set in place consequences to sin that actually serve as a protection. It's kind of like the old example of you touch a hot stove and you feel pain and you know to pull away. That's a consequence of that action. Well, it's the same thing with sin. There is often a natural consequence that we feel the pain or the guilt or the hurt, and it causes us to step away or step back from that sin that perhaps attracts us. The fourth thing that we see is the protection of established judgments. That as God sets consequences in place, He also says that there will be judgments for this. So there's a sense that there's a cost to sin, and we know that that cost is there. That causes us to slow down and think just a bit if we really believe that there is some kind of judgment that is attached to that sin beyond the natural consequences of it. Now, that brings us to the protection number 5. And the 5th protection is kind of an unusual protection, but it's the extent of our earthly life. When Adam and Eve were created, they lived like 900, and I think Methuselah lived 1,000 years. But just before the flood, God was frustrated with man, and He saw that sin was getting worse and worse. And God says, I'm going to limit man to 120 years. Later on, God limited them to 70 or maybe 80 years. But we see this limitation of life. Now, that means that even that, the extent of earthly life, serves as a protection that keeps us from living a long time and going deeper and deeper and deeper into sin. So even, the shortness of life can actually be a protection from the extent of sin. Number 6 is the example of godly people. Now, I think that's important because, not only does God tell us what to do, He gives us people in our lives who give us an example of how to really live the Christian life, of how to live a life of obedience, a life that glorifies God. In fact, Jesus said that the church is to be people filled with godly examples. Sometimes we fail at that. Sometimes we fail horribly, okay? But the ideal is, Jesus said the church is to be salt in society. And we are to be a light that gives clarity to the world around us. Now, last of all, the final protection is entrance into heaven. Because once we enter into heaven, we are protected by the God of the universe from even the presence of sin. Now, that means that in those 7 protections, God cares about us. And just as we said, in His justice, He will judge sin. In His love, He has set in place protections to keep us from sin. Now, that means that we have a very good God, and He is just, and He is loving, and He is worthy of our praise. So I hope that God is protecting you from that power of sin in your life, and I hope that you're gaining the victory. Well, we've talked enough about understanding sin. We'll pick up another topic tomorrow, but you have a great day in the meantime. Bye for now. God bless.